He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
You ever notice when you're being set up, somebody asks you one of those questions that there really is no safe answer to the question. No matter how you answer it, it's going to come back to bite you. Sometimes it's in those employment tests or those aptitude tests, and they ask the same question maybe 10 different ways. As they ask the question, you realize, I think I've seen that before. It was just worded a little differently. And the wording sometimes is specifically designed to catch you off guard. They know you're going to answer it one way and then maybe answer it a little differently the other way because, they asked a twist to the question. Look, leaders know when they're being conditioned for a future response. Sometimes that's your spouse asking you a trick question that if you answer it wrong, the consequences are going to be bad. And sometimes it's the employment test. And sometimes it's worse than that. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. And I can tell you, I've kind of experienced many different versions of that, asking you questions to set you up for an answer that you probably didn't realize was a trick answer. In fact, there's a whole process of interrogation that law enforcement officers, especially detectives, CIA, FBI, people like that, are taught to utilize. Now, you need to know some things about that process. One of the things about that process is they're perfectly okay. It's legal, they're willing, and they want to get the information from you. And in so doing, they're perfectly okay within their legal bounds to offer you misleading information. Let me say that another way. They are welcome to lie to you as long as it ends in a confession. As long as you confess to what you did. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you look back over legal interrogations over the history of the criminal justice system in America, there are hundreds of people, hundreds of cited cases where cases have been overturned because someone wrote out a confession to a crime they did not commit. They were conditioned by the interrogation to answer questions in such a way that led them to believe themselves to be guilty of a crime they didn't commit. I want you to let that settle in for a minute because we're reaching a day in our criminal justice system, in our political criminal system, I don't use those words lightly, where crimes of politics have been elevated to a higher level than actual criminality. You can spend more time in jail these days for thinking the wrong thing about the wrong person than you can for physically harming someone or destroying or damaging or stealing private property. If you think I'm kidding, I just want you to do some research on that. Look at how many people have been arrested, indicted, and prosecuted for, the riots of the last few years. Then look specifically at which riots, which uprisings, which events had the most arrests. You're going to find there's a pretty clear divide And it has less to do with the damage that was done, the people that were harmed, the lives that were lost, and significantly more to do with the train of thought of the people who participated in that particular event. It's mind-boggling. It really is. But it's purposeful. Because while we look at that imbalance of criminal justice, that criminal imbalance, criminality, the balance of criminality that we call justice, might be a better way to say that. But as you look at that, what you're going to realize is that there's a clear ideological line. And while it's bad enough that we've already seen a significant departure from equal forms of justice, we've already seen a radical departure from the number of people who are arrested for crimes that have always been crimes on the books, that have been clearly identified as crimes, and their behavior is clearly marked, i.e. caught on videotape. Everybody knows what happened. It was eyewitnessed, and yet they go free, while the would-be victim of the crime gets charged. Those are bad enough. Just the fact that that happens is bad enough. Here's what's worse. That isn't the end of the line. The fact that that event has been flipped on its head and the criminal has been set free and the victim has been prosecuted, that's bad enough, but that's not where it ends. That's the conditioning. That's the conditioning. Well, how do we know? Because it's been happening for centuries. It happened in Hitler's Germany. It happened in Mao's China. It happened in Stalin's Russia. It happened in Venezuela. It happened in Cuba. It's nothing new under the sun. It's the same kind of process, but it is all about the disruption of civil society, bringing chaos in unrestrained, until the unrestrained chaos only has one solution, and that one solution has to be an iron fist that comes down on the chaos. Now, our civil society in the West has been pretty good at moderating itself for the last couple hundred years. It's been really good at, even if it's the neighborhood, the community rising up and going, no, we're not going to act like that in our community. During the George Floyd riots, we saw young mothers, when I say young, 20s and 30s, stand up and say, stop doing this on my street. This is my neighborhood. Take that nonsense somewhere else. And by and large, they were effective. But when we don't stand up for our communities, when chaos comes in from outside our communities and people who are destroying them don't care about that. And let me expand the concept of community. Because right now what we're not simply talking about is those guys aren't from our street. They don't live on our block. They're not from our zip code or our area code. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are coming from other states on buses to bring the chaos to a neighborhood they have zero concern about. It's not my house. It's not my neighbors. I don't have to live with those people. I will never see them again. I can do whatever I want to. The law is not going to prosecute me. And the neighbors don't know who I am. I'll be gone long before anything is done about this. So as a would-be chaos provider, I get off scot-free. That's not unintentional. But understand now that with more than 1 million people crossing our borders on a regular basis, unchecked, no background checks, no question about who they are or why they're here. Some not just from the triangle, if you will, from South America, from Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala, but people from all over the world coming across the border, some with ill intent, some with criminal intent, some with malicious political intent, some who are coming for the purpose of embedded chaos. You're being conditioned. You're being conditioned that people from outside your community can behave any way they want to and get away with it, and that you have no say in it. And in fact, if you do try to have a say in it, you might be the one that gets locked up. Don't defend your home. Don't defend your neighborhood. Don't defend your family or your children or even your space. Yes, there were people prosecuted for simply stating, this is my property, stay off of it. They were arrested, they were indicted, they had their physical property taken from them because they simply said, I'll stand my ground. You're being conditioned. If you were to think back to crazy movies like Red Dawn from, I don't know, almost 50 years ago now, the idea that neighbors would band together and go, not on my watch, not in my territory, not in my house, not in my neighborhood, not in my country. But see, leaders realize when they're being conditioned, whether it's by employees like Vivek Ramaswamy encountered, or when it's by a political class, as we're seeing in our media today, whether it's by an outside invading force, as many countries have seen. Afghanistan fought off Russia for almost 3 decades. Afghanistan, this big. Russia, this big. Millions of people in difference of forces, millions of dollars, billions of dollars in difference of military ability. But the Afghani people had the will to fight for what they knew to be theirs. They refused to give up their space. They refused to give up their ideologies. They refused to give up their homes. They refused to give up their families. They stood their ground. That's not the nature of Americans today. I saw a report just the other day that in less than 20 years, we've gone from 70% of people who consider themselves to be American citizens ranking patriotism or their loyalty to country in the highest category to less than 30. One generation. In one generation, we've gone from people who say, like Afghanistan, I'll stand my ground, it's my territory, these are my ideas, this is my family, this is my community, and I will defend it, to people saying, maybe we shouldn't even be a country. Bringing in the chaos from outside the community is conditioning. Inverting the law to stand on its head, to defend the chaos and prosecute the righteous defenders. That's a big problem. But it happens every day in leadership. We've seen it as individual leaders in small microcosms. We've seen the injustice. We've seen things where we thought something was wrong with this and someone should have to pay the price for this, but then no one does. I'll never forget when Tommy Wilson and I, elementary age kids, walking through the neighborhood with his brand new 10-speed, we ran into the neighborhood bully who was throwing an axe at his front tree in his front yard. And we rolled by and Tommy was showing off his bicycle and said, "Don't you like my new 10-speed?" And the kid took the axe and chopped the front tire in half, bent the rim, cut the tire clean in half, and then laughed about it. And I just stood there in absolute disbelief. And he looked at me and he said, "What are you going to do about it? I'm the one with the axe." It was unjust. It was wrong. It was probably illegal if we'd had enough sense to press the issue, but we just ran away in fear because the bully was the one with the weapon. There was nothing right about what he did, but he got away with it because he used fear and intimidation. The tactics that many are using today in the legal courts. You don't have to do anything wrong to be prosecuted by someone who has ill intent. Nefarious behavior has no limits. As long as in the end they have the results they want, any means justifies the ends. And right now, chaos is one of those means. The end, well, it's an end of the Western world as we know it. It's the rise of an elite class that is tyrannical worldwide. It's the beginning of the end of the world as we know it. The question is, will we as leaders, as influencers, as those who recognize when we're being conditioned, will we call it out? Will we stand up like the people of Afghanistan and stand our ground and go, not in my space, not in my neighborhood, not in my territory, not on my watch? Or will we, like the younger generation, say, well, maybe America is at the end. Maybe it's had its run of days. Let me tell you something. I've been to Cuba. I've been to Brazil. I've been to Honduras. I've been to the Congo. I've spoken with local individuals, ministry leaders, business leaders, and political leaders in all of those places. And I can tell you for a long, long time, they've looked at America and said, As long as America stands for freedom, there's hope for the rest of us. It's why we have immigration policies that we do. Bring us your tired, your huddled masses. Bring us those who want to fight for freedom. That's a whole different thing than importing a bunch of people for the purpose of chaos. People who say, I want to come to America for a better life. I want to become a part of the American dream. I want to have my opportunity to start over, even if it's with nothing. At least there's justice. At least there's freedom. At least there's individual opportunity and individual responsibility. That's what they're looking to come here for. But if you come here in the last 5 to 10 years, that's not what you found. What you found is chaos. Intentionally created and doctrinally reinforced, legally manipulated chaos. Friends, we're being conditioned. Just like Mao, just like Stalin, just like Hitler, we're being conditioned. And if you're missing that, wake up. There are a whole lot of things about to change in our world if we don't stand our ground and say, not in my space, not in my family, not in my community, not on my watch. Leaders know when they're being conditioned. They also know what the core values are to stand upon, and they stand their ground. Mine are clear: faith, family, and freedom. I'm J. Loren Norris for Leading Leaders Podcast on Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.
Thank you.